Writing, variant equals, document, ID equals, 58321, don't let her walk down that aisle. The words escaped someone's lips just as Emily Carter stepped into the grand hall, but the warning came too late. At 23, Emily had learned how to survive being ignored. She had learned how to lower her eyes when the pack whispered, how to smile when people called her weak, and how to pretend that the word rejected no longer hurt. Today, however, she was wearing white. The enormous wedding hall of Blackwood Castle shimmered beneath hundreds of golden lights, and every seat was filled. Wolves from distant territories had gathered beneath the royal banners, their voices fading into silence as Emily walked toward the altar. Her fingers trembled around a small bouquet of white roses. She could feel the weight of every stare. At the far end of the hall sat Alexander Blackwood, the Alpha King who had once been her mate. He wore a black ceremonial coat, his posture perfectly still, his pale face unreadable beneath the crown. He had rejected her months ago. Publicly. Completely. And yet he had come to her wedding. Emily refused to look at him again. Her attention stayed on Daniel Hayes, the man waiting at the altar. Daniel had never called her weak. He had never asked why the Alpha King had rejected her. He had simply offered her kindness when she had needed it most. That was enough. Emily took another step. Then another. The music continued softly around her, but something inside her suddenly felt wrong. A strange warmth spread beneath the fabric at her waist. She stopped. Her breath caught. Emily looked down. One tiny red mark had appeared against the perfect white of her wedding dress. Then another. Her bouquet slipped slightly in her hands. A murmur moved through the hall. "Emily?" Daniel whispered, stepping toward her. She tried to answer, but her voice would not come. The room seemed to tilt beneath her feet. She pressed one hand against the dress, her heart pounding as she struggled to remain standing. Across the hall, Alexander finally moved. His expression changed so quickly that Emily almost doubted what she had seen. The cold mask was gone. His eyes were fixed on the red stain spreading across the white fabric. He rose from his throne. Every conversation stopped. Hundreds of faces turned toward him. Emily stared at the man who had once told her she could never be his Luna. For months, he had ignored her. He had watched her disappear from his life and never followed. He had let her believe that their bond meant nothing. But now, as he stood before the entire kingdom, something in his face looked dangerously close to fear. "Who hurt her?" Alexander asked. His voice was quiet. Somehow, that made the entire hall colder. Emily's lips parted. She looked at him through eyes beginning to fill with tears. "Why do you care now?" The question echoed beneath the royal banners. Alexander said nothing. He simply looked at the blood on her wedding dr::. Months earlier, Emily had stood in the same castle beneath the same silver banners, but she had not been wearing white. She had worn a simple blue dress, her hands folded tightly before her as the Moon Council gathered to witness the decision that would change her life. Alexander Blackwood had stood across from her, already wearing the crown of the Alpha King. His expression had been calm, almost distant. Emily had searched his face for the man she once believed understood her. She found only a wall. "The bond is not enough," Alexander had said. The words had traveled through the chamber with painful clarity. "You cannot stand beside me as Luna." Emily remembered the silence that followed. No one defended her. No one stepped forward. She had wanted to ask him why. She had wanted to remind him of the quiet moments when they had understood each other without words, of the way his presence had once made the world feel less frightening. Instead, she simply lowered her eyes. "I understand," she had whispered. Alexander had looked away. That was the moment Emily learned that rejection did not always arrive with anger. Sometimes it arrived quietly, dressed in royal dignity, and left a person wondering whether any of the love they had felt had ever been real. After that day, Emily left the royal grounds. She returned to the small cottage her family had once considered too modest for someone connected to the throne. She spent her mornings tending the garden and her evenings reading beside the fireplace. Slowly, she rebuilt the pieces of herself that had been scattered by one sentence. She stopped waiting for Alexander. She stopped wondering whether he would come after her. And then Daniel Hayes entered her life. He was not the strongest alpha in the region, nor did he carry a royal title. What he offered was simpler. Respect. When he learned about her past, he did not ask her to explain herself. He simply said, "You deserve a life where you never have to wonder if you belong." Emily had cried that night, but for the first time, the tears brought relief instead of shame. Weeks passed. Her wedding plans became real. Flowers were chosen. Invitations were sent. Her white dress was carefully fitted by a local seamstress. Everyone expected the Alpha King to ignore the ceremony. Emily expected it too. Then, 3 days before the wedding, a royal messenger arrived at her cottage. The letter carried the black seal of Alexander Blackwood. Emily stared at it for a long moment before opening it. The message was brief. The Alpha King would attend her wedding. Nothing more. No explanation. No apology. Emily folded the letter and placed it inside a drawer. She told herself it meant nothing. But on the morning of her wedding, as she stood before the mirror and adjusted the veil over her dark hair, one question refused to leave her mind. If Alexander truly did not care, why had he come? She did not know that across the kingdom, the Alpha King had been asking himself the same question. The stranger opened his eyes, and Sarah forgot how to breathe. For a moment, the forest seemed completely still. The wind stopped moving through the pine branches, the stream beside them became nothing more than a soft whisper, and even the injured wolf beneath her hands seemed to wait. Sarah had expected fear. She had expected suspicion. Instead, she felt something she could not explain, a strange warmth spreading through her chest as those silver-gray eyes met hers. "You should not be here," the stranger said quietly. His voice was deep, controlled, and nothing like the helpless sound she had heard earlier. Sarah swallowed and tightened the cloth around his shoulder. "Neither should you." His gaze dropped to her hands. "You helped me. You needed help. You knew who I was." Sarah shook her head. "I did not even know your name." Something changed in his expression. It was almost relief, quickly hidden behind calm. Sarah looked toward the dark trees. The voices from the pack had disappeared, but she knew they could return. She gathered her small herb pouch and rose slowly. "Can you walk?" The stranger tried to stand, then paused as if testing his strength. "I can manage." "Then come with me." He studied her for several seconds. "You trust strangers too easily." Sarah gave a faint, tired smile. "No. I simply know what it feels like when nobody chooses to help you." The words left a silence between them. He looked at her differently after that. Sarah turned toward the narrow trail leading to her cottage, unaware that the man behind her was watching every careful step. She had spent years believing her greatest weakness was being an omega with no place in the pack. Yet tonight, that same gentleness had led her to a stranger who carried himself like someone accustomed to command. When they reached the cottage, Sarah pushed open the wooden door and lit the small oil lamp. The room was simple, warm, and quiet. She guided him toward a chair near the hearth and returned with fresh water and clean cloth. As she worked, she noticed details she had missed in the darkness. His clothes were plain, but the fabric was far too fine for an ordinary traveler. A small silver clasp rested beneath his collar, engraved with a symbol she recognized from old stories. The royal wolf. Sarah's fingers stopped. "Where did you get that?" The stranger looked down at the clasp. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. Then someone outside called her name. Sarah froze. A second voice followed, carrying the authority of the pack elders. Sarah Whitlock, open this door. The stranger slowly stood. His posture changed completely. The tired traveler disappeared, replaced by someone whose presence filled the little cottage with quiet power. He looked at Sarah and spoke only 3 words. Let them come. The knock came again, slower this time. Sarah's heart tightened as she stared at the wooden door. She knew those voices. They belonged to the same people who had watched her rejection earlier and said nothing. The same people who had decided she was not worth choosing. Sarah Whitlock, Elder Mordain called from outside. Open the door. Sarah glanced at the stranger beside the hearth. He no longer looked weak. His shoulders were straight, his silver-gray eyes calm, and there was something unmistakably commanding in the way he stood. What do you want me to do? She whispered. Nothing, he said. Let them see what they came looking for. Sarah hesitated before opening the door. 3 elders stood outside, accompanied by several pack members. Their eyes immediately moved past her and settled on the stranger. Elder Mordain frowned. Who is this? A traveler, Sarah answered. I found him in the forest. He needed help. One of the elders looked toward the blood-stained cloth on the table, then back at her. You brought a stranger into your home without permission. Sarah lowered her eyes. Old habits returned quickly. He was hurt. You should have left him there. The stranger spoke before Sarah could answer. And if she had? His voice was quiet, but every person outside fell silent. Elder Mordain studied him carefully. This does not concern you. The stranger stepped forward. It concerns me completely. Sarah felt the air change. She had heard powerful alphas before, but this was different. There was no shouting, no threat, no need to prove anything. His authority seemed to exist without effort. One of the elders narrowed his eyes. Who are you? The stranger did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Sarah. His expression softened for only a moment. The first person in this pack to show me kindness tonight. Sarah's chest tightened. She had not expected those words to matter so much. Elder Mordain's gaze hardened. Sarah, you are coming with us. She stiffened. Why? Because the Alpha King is traveling through Thorn Valley tonight. Every member of the pack is required to report unusual visitors. Sarah looked back at the stranger. Something in his eyes told her not to be afraid. He is not dangerous, she said. You cannot know that, the elder replied. Neither can you, the stranger said. Silence settled over the doorway. Then the sound of horses approached from the distant road. Not one horse. Many. Pack members turned toward the trees as torchlight appeared between the branches. The elders exchanged uneasy looks. Sarah heard the unmistakable rhythm of a royal procession moving toward the cottage. The stranger closed his hand around the silver clasp at his collar. His eyes remained fixed on the approaching lights. Sarah suddenly understood that the symbol she had seen was not decoration. It was a royal crest. Her breath caught. Who are you? She whispered. The stranger looked at her, and this time he did not hide the truth. Sarah, you saved the Alpha King tonight. Sua, the words seemed to stop the night itself. Sarah stared at him, unable to understand what she had just heard. The injured stranger she had carried from the forest was the Alpha King. The ruler whose name had filled every village with whispers. The man she had been taught to fear had been sitting quietly beside her hearth, accepting her help without revealing who he was. Outside, the royal procession drew closer. Torchlight moved between the trees, painting the cottage walls with shifting gold. Elder Mordain stepped backward, suddenly pale. Your Majesty, he whispered. The stranger gave a small nod. You may stand. Every elder lowered their head. Sarah remained frozen in the doorway. She had never seen an entire group of powerful wolves become so silent at once. The Alpha King turned toward her. Sarah. Her name sounded different in his voice, almost gentle. You are not required to bow. She swallowed. Why not? Because tonight, you treated me as a person before you knew I was a king. Sarah looked down at her hands. They were still marked with traces of herbs from the healing she had given him. I only did what anyone should have done. No, he answered. They saw someone in need and walked away. You stopped. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. One finally gathered enough courage to speak. Your Majesty, Sarah is only an Omega. She has no standing to receive royal attention. The Alpha King's expression became still. Is that what you believe? The elder lowered his eyes. I meant no disrespect. Then do not disrespect her. The words were calm, yet they carried through the cottage with unmistakable authority. Sarah's heart began to pound. All her life, she had heard that being an Omega made her lesser. Tonight, the most powerful wolf in the Northern Territories had challenged that belief with only a few quiet words. The Alpha King stepped toward the table and picked up the small bundle of herbs she had used. You knew how to treat my injury. My grandmother taught me. And you did it without asking for anything. Sarah shook her head. I did not know who you were. A faint smile touched his face. That may be why I trusted you. Before Sarah could answer, a royal guard appeared at the door and bowed deeply. Your Majesty, the council is waiting. They request that you return to the palace immediately. The Alpha King looked toward the road, then back at Sarah. For the first time, uncertainty appeared in his eyes. I will return. Sarah blinked. Return here? Yes. Elder Mordain looked alarmed. Sarah could only stare. The king moved toward the doorway, then paused beside her. You gave me kindness when everyone else gave me silence. I will not forget that. He stepped into the cold night. Sarah watched the royal procession disappear beyond the trees, but one question remained in her heart. Why had the Alpha King hidden himself in her forest? And why did it feel as though meeting him had awakened something inside her that had been waiting for years? By sunrise, the entire pack knew the stranger was the Alpha King. Sarah woke before the first light touched the windows, but she had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his silver-gray gaze and heard the quiet certainty in his voice. You saved the Alpha King tonight. The words felt impossible. She had spent years believing that her kindness was nothing more than a small gift with little value. Now the most powerful wolf in the Northern Territories had remembered. It. A soft knock came at her door. Sarah opened it to find a royal messenger standing outside, holding a sealed letter. Sarah Whitlock? Yes. He bowed respectfully. His Majesty requests your presence at the royal palace. Sarah's fingers tightened around the edge of the door. Why? The messenger smiled faintly. He said you would understand when you arrived. She almost laughed. Of course she would not understand. Nothing about the last 12 hours made sense. Still, she accepted the letter. The royal seal was warm beneath her fingertips, carrying a faint scent of pine and winter air. By mid-morning, Sarah was riding in a small royal carriage toward the palace. The journey took nearly 2 hours along a winding mountain road. Outside the window, the familiar forests of Thorn Valley slowly gave way to wide green fields and distant stone towers. Sarah had never traveled this far from her pack. She felt nervous, but beneath the nervousness was something else. Curiosity. Why had the Alpha King been alone in the forest? Why had he hidden his identity? And why had he chosen her? When the palace finally appeared, Sarah forgot to breathe for a moment. Its dark stone towers rose above the valley, surrounded by silver banners bearing the royal wolf crest. Guards opened the great gates as the carriage approached. Inside, everything felt larger than anything Sarah had known. Marble floors reflected the morning light. Tall windows overlooked gardens filled with white roses. Servants moved quietly through the halls, but every person who passed Sarah looked twice. An Omega from Thorn Valley had arrived with a royal invitation. That alone was enough to start whispers. Then the palace doors opened. The Alpha King stood at the far end of the hall. He wore a dark formal coat, his silver-gray eyes steady beneath neatly brushed dark hair. There was no sign of the wounded traveler she had found in the forest. Yet when he saw Sarah, his expression softened. "You came." Sarah stopped several feet away. "You asked me to." He walked toward her, then paused at a respectful distance. "There is something I need you to know." Sarah's heartbeat quickened. "About last night? About why I was there?" He looked toward the tall windows, where sunlight spread across the marble floor. "I was not lost. I was searching for someone." Sarah waited. His eyes returned to hers. "And I believe I finally found her." Sarah stood perfectly still as the Alpha King's words settled over her. "You were searching for me?" she asked, almost afraid of the answer. He nodded. "For several months." He crossed toward a tall window overlooking the palace gardens, his expression becoming distant. "There is an old prophecy known only to the royal family. It speaks of an Omega whose gift is not strength in the usual sense, but the ability to calm what others cannot." Sarah's breath caught. Her grandmother had always called her strange warmth a blessing, but Sarah had never believed it could matter beyond small acts of kindness. "Why me?" she whispered. The Alpha King turned back toward her. "Because my wolf recognized your presence before I did." Sarah lowered her eyes. "When you found me in the forest, you knew." "I knew something was different. I did not know the truth until you touched my shoulder and the pain inside me became quiet." His words left her speechless. She remembered that moment. She had only wanted to help a wounded stranger. She had never imagined her hands could reach something deeper than an injury. "Then why did you hide who you were?" she asked. "Because I needed to know whether someone would help me without knowing my title." His voice softened. "You did." Before Sarah could answer, the palace doors opened and an elderly woman entered carrying a silver tray. She stopped when she saw Sarah. Her eyes widened. "Is that her?" The Alpha King nodded. "Yes." The woman approached slowly, studying Sarah with quiet wonder. "The resemblance is there." Sarah frowned. "Resemblance to whom?" The woman looked at the king. He gave a small nod. Then she reached into a velvet pouch and removed an old silver pendant. The symbol engraved upon it matched the royal wolf crest, but beneath it was another mark Sarah had never seen before. A small crescent surrounded by 7 stars. "This belonged to the last moon healer," the woman said. "She disappeared 21 years ago." Sarah stared at the pendant. Her hands began to tremble. 21 years. The same number as her age. "My mother died when I was a baby," she whispered. "I was told she was ordinary." The Alpha King stepped closer, his expression serious. "Sarah, your mother was not ordinary." The room seemed to grow quieter. "She was once the royal healer." Sarah looked from him to the pendant. "Then why was I raised in Thorn Valley?" He did not answer immediately. That silence told her more than words could have. Someone had hidden her. Someone had taken her away from the palace and erased the truth. Then a bell rang from the far tower. Once. Twice. A palace guard hurried into the room. "Your Majesty, the council has discovered that Sarah is here. They are demanding answers." The Alpha King looked at Sarah. She expected fear in his eyes. Instead, she saw certainty. "Then they will hear the truth." The council was already waiting. Sarah could feel their judgment before the great doors even opened. Her palms grew warm around a silver pendant, and she wondered if the strange gift she had carried all her life was finally about to become the reason everyone turned against her. The Alpha King walked beside her, calm and steady, while the royal healer followed several steps behind. When the doors opened, dozens of council members turned toward them. Whispers moved through the chamber like a cold breeze. "An Omega," someone murmured. "She is the girl from Thorn Valley." Sarah lowered her eyes, but the Alpha King stopped beside her. "Look at her," he said. The room became silent. "Not because she is an Omega. Look at her because she saved my life." A senior counselor stepped forward. "Your Majesty, with respect, one act of kindness does not prove royal blood." Sarah felt her confidence weaken. She had spent years hearing the same message. "You are ordinary. You are weak. You do not belong." Then the elderly royal healer raised the silver pendant. This was carried by Queen Alara, the last moon healer. Sarah looked up sharply. "My mother was named Elena." "Her full name was Alara Elena Whitlock," the healer replied. Sarah's breath caught. A murmur spread across the chamber. The counselor shook his head. "That cannot be proven." The Alpha King turned toward him. "Then let the moonstone decide." At the center of the chamber stood an ancient white stone used during royal ceremonies. Sarah had seen drawings of it in old books, but she had never imagined standing before it. The king gestured toward the stone. "Place your hand upon it." Sarah hesitated. "What if nothing happens?" He looked directly at her. "Then nothing changes. But if something does happen, you will finally know who you are." Sarah stepped forward. Her heart beat faster with every step. She placed her palm against the cool surface. For several seconds, nothing happened. The council began to whisper again. Sarah felt disappointment rise inside her. Perhaps she had imagined everything. Perhaps she was still the same forgotten Omega from Thorn Valley. Then the stone warmed beneath her hand. A soft silver light spread across its surface, followed by 7 tiny points of blue light that appeared like stars beneath winter ice. The entire chamber fell silent. The royal healer covered her mouth in astonishment. "The moon healer has returned." Sarah pulled her hand back, trembling. The Alpha King did not look surprised. He looked relieved. He stepped toward her, his voice quiet enough that only she could hear. "You were never weak." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. For the first time, she believed him. But before the moment could settle, the great doors opened again. A messenger hurried inside, pale and breathless. "Your Majesty, Thorn Valley has sent an urgent request." The Alpha King turned. "What happened?" The messenger looked at Sarah. "They are asking for the Omega to be returned immediately." Sarah felt the room disappear around her. "Return me," she whispered. The messenger lowered his head. "The elders claim the Omega belongs to Thorn Valley and must answer for leaving without permission." Sarah looked at the Alpha King. For the first time since entering the palace, she saw something colder than anger in his expression. It was certainty. "She belongs to no one," he said. The council fell silent. Sarah's heart lifted at those words, but another feeling followed close behind. Thorn Valley was still her home. Her grandmother was there. The people who had known her since childhood were there. Even after everything they had done, Sarah could not simply forget them. "I want to go back," she said quietly. The Alpha King looked at her. "You do not have to." "I know." Sarah touched the silver pendant at her chest. "But I need to understand why they want me back." He studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You will not go alone." By late afternoon, a royal carriage was traveling north toward Thorn Valley. Sarah sat beside the window, watching the familiar mountains grow closer. The Alpha King rode beside the carriage with his royal guard, refusing to let her make the journey without protection. As the first houses of the pack appeared, Sarah noticed something strange. No one was working in the fields. No children were playing near the road. The pack grounds were unusually quiet. When the carriage stopped, Elder Mordain hurried forward with several pack leaders behind him. His expression changed when he saw the royal crest. He bowed deeply. "Your Majesty." The Alpha King stepped down and looked toward him. "You requested Sarah's return." "Yes, Your Majesty." "Why?" Mordain hesitated. Sarah stepped forward. "Tell him." The elder looked at her, then lowered his eyes. "Your father received a message this morning. There are records in the old family archive concerning your mother." Sarah's breath caught. "What records?" "Her connection to the royal court." The Alpha King looked at Sarah. She could see the same realization forming in his eyes. Someone in Thorn Valley had known the truth about her family for years. Someone had chosen to keep it hidden. Sarah turned toward the old pack house. Her grandmother's cottage stood at the edge of the trees, exactly where she had left it. She suddenly felt a powerful pull toward it. "I need to see my grandmother." The Alpha King nodded. Together they walked along the familiar path. When Sarah opened the cottage door, she found her grandmother waiting beside the hearth, holding an old wooden box. The elderly woman looked at the Alpha King, then at Sarah. Tears filled her eyes. "It is time," she whispered. Sarah knelt beside her. "Time for what?" Her grandmother placed the box in her hands. "Time for you to know why your mother hid you here." Sarah lifted the lid. Inside was a faded royal cloak, a silver ring, and a letter bearing the same 7-star symbol as her pendant. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the letter. Only one sentence had been written inside. "Sarah, if you are reading this, the moon has chosen you again, and this time, the kingdom will know your name."